Can you tell us when we have children that are HIV positive and hepatitis C positive, what are the real risks for workers and other children in the childcare setting?
I think the biggest risk is ignorance, which is why we do what we do. It's getting the information out there so people know what they're actually dealing with. For quite a few years, hepatitis C was actually classed as a sexually transmitted disease, but it's not. Hepatitis C is blood to blood. So infected blood has to get into non-infected blood for an infection to occur. With HIV, it can be blood to blood, but any body fluid that contains the virus, and if there's an opening in somebody else's body, whether it's through a needle site or through sex, if it's getting into another person's body, then they can become infected. So knowing those sort of basics on how the diseases work goes a long way to understanding how to deal with it. If you keep yourself healthy, that is reducing the risk of being infected by any of these. If your skin is chapped and you come in contact with a body fluid that has a virus, and it doesn't have to be those two that we've been talking about, it could be any number of viruses. If there's an opening into your bloodstream, you're going to get infected.
It's difficult to point to just one reason why people aren't staying. From what our students, our graduates have told us though, the principal reason is the lack of reimbursement. In other words, they're not getting paid enough in order for them to continue to work in this field and have their living that they expect to have as a professional. So many of them are leaving to go to other areas of the economy. Some of those areas are still working with children. Many of them are becoming educational assistants in the schools, or they're choosing to work in different other areas of childcare in government or in those areas. So that's a real big problem. They're choosing not to remain where I think their skill sets and where we need highly qualified and highly skilled people. And of course, we're working with our children from 0 to 5 or 0 to 6.
My name's Ann Gedros, and I work here at Yukon College as the coordinator of the Early Childhood Development Program. Our program works with students who are working in early childhood settings, some students who are just beginning to prepare for a career in that work, many students who are already working in that capacity. And they work in childcare centers, they work in family daycare homes, and as assistants in the school system.
So you've worked in centers, you've been director for centers,
That's right.
You've worked as a government inspector for centers, and now you are the coordinator for the early child care program. From your experience, are you able to speak to the value that educated workers bring to the field?
Well, educated workers are an important piece of that whole puzzle of quality childcare or quality early learning experiences. They can make the difference for a child, whether the child has a good day, a healthy day, a safe day, or not. They make a difference for parents. When parents are going to work or going to school themselves, it's important for them to know that their children are well cared for and that their children are thriving in those early learning centers.
Our program has been very innovative. We're one of the first programs in the college that used a lot of what we call distributive learning, or you may have heard the word distance education, throughout its program. We've been offering courses throughout the Yukon and actually throughout the NWT now for well over a decade, using such technologies as audio conferencing, video conferencing, web-based conferencing, websites, as well as creating a lot of our own materials, which also included videos and many other types of interactive media. The program was also really relies heavily on the expertise within our community to give the students a real hands-on experience. So many of our instructors, all of them who hold master's degrees, are also working in the field of childcare. So they bring that experience into the classroom for the students.
I think it's important that people do have the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities that the job requires. And many people gain that through formal education. Many people gain that through experience. And I think the people who gain that best, combine that experience and the formal learning.
Can you tell us a little bit about that process of moving from a for-profit to a non-profit program?
Well, that was an interesting process. I was involved on the national level with childcare for quite a long time in the Advocacy Association and the Childcare Federation. And I saw, as I was out there and hearing the information that was coming, I had my own experience in the Yukon, but I certainly got a different impression of nonprofit and profit childcare just hearing around the tables outside on the national level, that there were a lot of problems with the way childcare was perceived. And it wasn't so much, like some of the studies, the research were showing that some of the better quality care was in nonprofit centers. And even though I was up here and with my own experience, I could see that some of the private centers were offering like excellent childcare. It wasn't always the case, and the more that I lobbied for better childcare and funding in childcare, the more I realized that the play care with the center that I was involved with should go nonprofit, and I couldn't really just lobby for money to go in my own pocket per se, or the perception that money would go in my own pocket, but I had to, the center itself should go nonprofit. So we started a parent advisory board, and really it transitioned into a nonprofit center. Some of the pros were, I mean, there was a lot more involvement from the parents and the community on the parent board, the advisory board, and then the board that took over. It was actually a staff parent board that took over. So there was a lot more input from other people about how the decisions that were made. For example, you know, if we're going to, should we put the fees up, or should we drop the hot lunch program, or what should we do? And then just going to the advisory board and the parent board, I mean, it just made the decision a broader based decision, and that was a good thing. Some of the, and I mean, I guess the lobbying efforts would be better from a parent advisory board, because there were a lot more people then who would know the situation and what the advantages and disadvantages were and everything, and they could speak like in more voices than just one voice or a few voices. So that was probably a good thing. Some of the I remember one of the parents said, well, Carol, he said, if you go nonprofit, he said, what's going to happen to the profit? And I guess that was probably one of the disadvantages for the play care, because I mean, there's no profit really. There wasn't any profit. I mean, it basically, I subsidized it by my own work, you know, and what I was getting. I think at the end, when I left after 7 years, I think my highest year of earnings was about $12,000, and you know, really, it wasn't a lot of profit. You couldn't get a director for that amount, and you couldn't get the number of hours that I'd worked for that amount. And the play care, I mean, did run into some financial difficulties after that, you know, and which was a disadvantage.
Every child needs something different. And we can agree pretty much that's almost, well, maybe not, but every child has these different kinds of needs, and then we find out that the child, after we've dealt with the outside, we find out that the child has their own particular gifts. And again, we go back and we say, well, this is empty, or something like that. And then we again reach in and find out that maybe the child has more inside of them than we ever realize. That potential, the trick, and I know we've got to end this, is to put the child in the driver's seat of their own potentiality, the release of it.
It's just so rich beyond some of the cut and paste. We do regular cut and paste too as well, usually with a cultural theme or a seasonal theme tied in it. So you've got seasons, you've got the multicultural theme, we've got the baking, the art, the science, all these components just flow together. And then overlying the whole thing is working together as a team. The children, as I said before, don't touch each other's art. That is something they need to respect. There's working to keep the wood in the house for the wood stove so that the children can dry their mitts. And when the wood gets dumped, they'll help stack a bit. So they rake the leaves, they weed the garden, and from that they get the benefits of it. They'll harvest the garden too, and they will take carrots and potatoes home to share with their family.
We are going to make 3 kinds of ink. What kind of ink are we trying to make right now? Black. Dark ink. What's another kind of ink? Who wants to grind some ink? Me. Okay, one at a time. Take turns. I have 3 ink stones, and I'll start with
7 pounds,
So this is it's
8 ounces. No,
Yeah, do another piece of paper.
the sky's unmistakably baby boy blue. Well, mom and dad are tired and doing all right.
Just to get ideas, they're not for coloring.
The rest of us shine in the mud and the sun.
I know what to paint now.
It's kind of like what Picasso said when he was talking about he spent all his life learning to paint like a child.
Me.
You need a
Can
pen.
you draw a circle in here?
You can draw a circle.
I'm just gonna put this in the
You can trace it. And I can put it on my...
My name is Kay.
Well, certainly we want to see a stronger integration and a stronger role for First Nation mentors of all kinds, professionals in the Western society, but also mentors who are very traditional, like hunters, trappers, and fishers, and particularly our elders, who are very successful at living in both worlds. Our children are challenged today with the fact that there are 2 worlds they have to walk in. One is one grounded in our ancestry and in our culture and our traditions, and the other is in the Western world, trying to get a meaningful job, having a meaningful participation in the Western society at all spectrums, in the social, political, and economic systems. It's no easy undertaking, and it's an incredible challenge for Aboriginal people. And giving young minds an opportunity to see excellent examples of people being successful at that is what we definitely need to do, and we are looking at mentorship programs as well.
Currently, there is no project funding because early childcare is not a priority.
You won't catch up with me.
Lots to eat. The tummies are getting full.
The tummy might get
In the pictures. And his name's Henry Cole. And excuse me, you have to have a seat just while we read. Okay, please listen. You hold that hold on to that for me for later. We may need that in the story. Now the title of the book is called The Sissy Duckling.
Our culture is based on an oral tradition, so everything is handed down by storytelling, by doing, by showing the children, role modeling what we want them to be and how to conduct themselves with one another, with the community, with the land, with the animals, and those teachings are brought about through stories.
What about